This is the third video in the three-part lecture series for week 3 of Career and Employment Resources. If you've not already viewed parts 1 and 2, please do go back and watch those first, and then you can carry on with this third and final part of the lecture series. We want to now turn our attention to the what's out there stage. We have explored Who Am I quite fully last week and a little bit in the lectures for this week. And what you will need to do is, when you feel that you and the client have compiled enough information about what they have to offer prospective employers and or what fields might be of interest to them, so you've created some kind of a picture and helped the client to get a clear fix on who they are, you can then begin helping the client explore prospective occupations or educational pathways. So once we have completed the Who Am I work, that work should generate some ideas for the client about what types of careers and occupations or work might be of interest to them. And then you want to consider, are they able to go directly into that type of work or that type of career? Do they need additional education? Do they need upgrading? And so on. So you can begin helping the client to explore these prospective occupations and or educational pathways. And as I've already talked about, you may need to encourage the client to take their time with stage 1, but you don't want to frustrate them by refusing to provide resources or information related to stage 2. And I think I've touched on this before, but I'll just revisit it here for a moment. So if the client is already 100% clear about what their occupational target is, and they're eager to jump straight to, a little bit of what's out there, and then they really want to go right to how do I get there, you can still kind of sneak in some of the Who Am I discussion. For example, if you're looking at occupational descriptions on the NOC, which describe the activities that would be performed and skills needed in a specific job, you can ask the client, how does this description fit with your interests and skills? If they can't answer that question, that would be a place to introduce, well, why don't we do this short assessment process? How about if you just do this skills checklist? Give them something quick and easy so that at least they've got some of that Who Am I information. You want to try and create as complete a picture of Who Am I as you can, and some clients will be patient enough to do that in a very robust fashion. But others, if they're eager, you need to try and still inject some of that Who Am I discussion into your work with them and then move on to what's out there. Let me just get all of these little bits and pieces of this diagram up here. This shows you what types of things you would want to be exploring as part of what's out there. Remember, this is knowledge of the world of work, such as occupational descriptions, as well as learning pathways, different types of education and training that might be available. So first of all, the resources might be in this area electronic, old-fashioned print, could be audio-visual, for example, videos on YouTube. So resources can fall into any one of these categories. The types of things that you want to explore, regardless of what the resources are, would be things like occupational descriptions, interests and personality that are expected in the field. As an example, if you're looking at an occupation such as being an accountant, then the description under that is going to probably emphasize that people need to be good with numbers and very detail-oriented. So you can go back to the Who Am I stage if you're talking with a client about being an accountant and explore how they are with numbers and whether they are detail-oriented. So a lot of these descriptions can then fit with things like interests and personality, education and training. So again, you want to explore what's available within a particular area of interest, what it might involve. Someone might want to go into a field that they don't know much about, so there'd be some exploration here about what sorts of educational programs they might consider. Trends in the particular occupations that they're considering, including outlooks and projections. And we've certainly looked at resources that might help with this aspect, such as the NOC, and we'll look at some others in just a moment. There is another way also to get what's out there information, and that is for the client to have firsthand experiences. Some of these might include that they might volunteer to do a bit of work in a particular type of sector. So if someone thinks, for example, that they might want to work in a field where they're doing a lot of work with horses. Maybe they want to be an equine coach or something along those lines. So they might then be asked to volunteer. You might suggest that they might volunteer, let's say, at a stable to get some exposure to see if they really like it, if they haven't already had that exposure. Job shadowing opportunities, so following somebody around that's doing the work or observing them doing the work that the client is interested in doing. Networking, of course, and that really partly connects also to the point at the bottom, information interviews. So talking with people in your network or connecting with people in your network that can tell you a bit more from a firsthand experience what it's like to do that type of work. And of course, if you do information interviews, you likely would be, assuming we're out of the pandemic period, you might actually be meeting with somebody in their own work environment where you can really get a sense of, what is it like to be in this sort of work environment. You can also explore courses of study, and this could mean taking a particular quick course on a subject that seems to be of interest. In the olden days, you could actually, before the pandemic, you could quite often arrange to go and audit a course, or they might have, for example, a college open house day where you can go in and sample different programs and get a sense of sitting in classes, what the content is like, what the environment's like. And of course, linking up with professional organizations and associations. Now, some of these do not allow people to participate in their events unless they are registered members of their association. But there are plenty of other types of organizations and groups out there that people could explore, going to their events or attending their online workshops, whatever it is, just to get some exposure to the particular field that they're interested in. So there are many, many ways to do the exploration in the what's out there stage. So of course, this does often require, especially during the pandemic age, doing online research. There are also many good print and audiovisual resources available that can help with this part of the research. And I know we are getting more and more into a digital age where we are not using hard copy print things like books, but there are still many, many good books out there, many good titles, and I'll show you a couple of examples in a moment that are available both in print and digital form that can help with exploring what's out there information. One thing that's really important in this category is that if you're working with what's out there information, that you check that it is up to date, that it is the most current information it can be. Now, it doesn't mean that you might discard it completely. The NOC, for example, I believe has a 5-year term for the information. When they, as it gets closer to the end of that 5 years, they begin to work on reviewing a particular field and updating that information. If you're using the NOC, then you want to ensure that you check where are we in that 5-year cycle. If this seems like this information is from almost 5 years ago, then you'd want to supplement it with something that's a little bit more current. There'll still be lots of good information on the NOC, but you'd want to ensure that it's all still pretty much accurate and up to date for the client. So some of the things to explore would be, as I've already touched on, occupational descriptions. What's the working environment like? What sorts of tasks might a person have to do? Even physical demands. Certain occupations require much more physical involvement or many hours of standing or the ability to lift something or to work outside in, sometimes harsh conditions in our environment. The what's out there resources may also demonstrate or illustrate interests and personality style that are needed in specific occupations, areas of education or training that are needed, trends that are in occupations of interest, and the world of work in general, and then occupational outlooks and projections. So when we think about trends, for example, we've talked in other courses about the idea of precarious employment and the fact that a lot more jobs are being offered in a contract, part-time, short-term type of format. So we would want to look at if a client really wants to hopefully find a permanent full-time job. So have a look at their occupation of interest and what are the trends with regard to part-time and full-time and gigs that are short-term. What's happening in that particular field right now? Is it likely that the client is not going to be able to find that permanent full-time job that they want? Or is this a field that it seems like employers are still leaning more towards hiring employees full-time in positions that are not renewable, that don't expire at the end of a contract, and so on. So these are all the kinds of things that you might explore, the information that you might help the client to gather as you are working through the what's out there stage. So when we look at the three different types of resources, online, print, and audiovisual, I think they pretty much speak for themselves. Online websites can provide lots of great occupational descriptions and outlooks. Then we have print books or other print publications on educational pathways. And some of that, when you put it out in print in a formal sense, it can get outdated pretty quickly, but there are many occupations where things do not change that dramatically. So you can certainly look at print publications. And then audiovisual, pretty old-fashioned and quaint DVDs. Some people still do use those, or online videos with workers in specific fields describing what it's like to work in those occupations. So again, there's lots of this type of information out there, and you might aim to have a mix of these types of resources to fit different clients' needs and learning styles. So some clients will not be into reading books at all. Some clients may have limitations in what they can do. They might even have limits as far as being able to easily access online materials. So you want to really try and have a mix of different types of resources to fit depending on a client's needs. So let's have a look at some examples of specific resources. There are, of course, many good free resources available online through the Government of Canada. And this is one website here that you've already touched on, the Job Bank, in other courses, and I think we might have even looked at it in the last week or two in this course. And this provides a really good what's out there information organized by occupation, wages, outlook, fields of study, trends, and news. And a lot of this is connected to the NOC, which of course we have had a look at. So that's the Government of Canada. This is one example of the Government of Ontario website, which provides very good information on job profiles, labor market information, trends, other useful resources. So these are two very, very good resources that you might look at for what's out there information. There are also many, many, many other websites and resources that you can look at online. And I put a list together here of the really good ones that are quite reliable that you could definitely use with clients. And what I'm going to ask you to do this week is to go and have a look at each one of these links and really explore. Some of them you will have already perhaps had a look at, perhaps the Alberta website, you would have already looked at that. But a lot of these you may not have seen. It's certainly not within the context of this course or other courses I've taught. So I'm going to ask you this week to go and explore each of these links. And it will be important as you are doing that to make notes on what each one offers and to add these to your list that you're compiling of the resources in the three different categories. Again, you're going to need that list to consult when you're doing the case study assignment, and you will also need it to consult when you're doing the test at the end of the course. All of these links are to sites that I have personally checked out quite thoroughly. They're all very reliable and very reputable if you apply the ABCD model to them. So these are certainly resources that I would recommend that you consider using when you're exploring the what's out there phase with your clients. So I've already touched on this quite a bit. Any online resources that you use or share with clients should be, of course, carefully evaluated using the ABCD model. And this is important because, of course, anyone can put any information online. And there are still many people out there who do believe if it's on the internet, it must be true. So very important that you do evaluate resources and ensure that you carefully look at them and thoroughly look at them before you give them to clients. Ensure that you do keep any lists of links that you give to the clients up to date so they don't become frustrated with broken or outdated or inaccurate links. And it is important to check them. Even if the link is still working, do verify that the information that you thought was on that page is still there, because sometimes things obviously do get moved around online. Some examples of old-fashioned print publications. I happen to have all three of these in my library. It was just kind of a coincidence that the same author appears on all three of them, but obviously this person is very prolific in generating what's out there information. As an example, 150 best low-stress jobs. Someone might say, I really want a job that just does not have very much stress involved. And, most jobs today do have a certain level of stress, but this book does review some examples of jobs that are known to be a little bit less in terms of day-to-day stress and pressure. Quick STEM careers guide. So STEM stands for science, technology, environment, and engineering and mathematics. So there's been a lot of attention paid to these fields in recent years, and we use the acronym STEM to refer to them, as people are often not attracted to these occupations. They see them as being too hard, as requiring a higher level of education that maybe they don't want to invest in. And there's, a certain amount of truth in that, but there are also certain demographics that were not traditionally steered towards these types of occupations. So, for example, it wouldn't have been unusual 10 years ago to go into an engineering class, and the vast majority of it would be made up of male students. So there are programs out there that, for example, are targeting specifically women to come into these occupations and targeting other demographic sectors that may not consider these as occupations. So anyone who maybe comes in and says, well, I am kind of thinking about, I hear a lot about STEM and how these occupations are available. What does that mean, and how would what sorts of occupations fit with this? So this would be an example of a resource you might give to a client who is thinking about doing anything to do with science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. Someone who's thinking about something in healthcare, what sorts of, and when this is saying major choices in healthcare, it means major choices in doing an educational program. If I want to target some kind of a healthcare occupation, what sorts of programs could I take, and what majors would I focus on? So these are some good examples of print publications that you might share with clients. Examples of some audiovisual resources would include things like this DVD series, Young Entrepreneurs, Learning the Business of Youth Self-Employment. So you may have someone who is young and has a great idea, really hot idea for starting their own business. This would be a good resource to share with them, and these are available from Career Life Skills Resources. I have not checked lately to see if they have put these online. Chances are they probably have. Here are a couple of additional examples of videos that these are just examples. If someone says, I'm interested in working as a firefighter, this is a video that I found that someone talks about what it's like to be a firefighter who's actually in the field. Same for someone who says, I really love working with cars. I'm really good with my hands. What types of occupations might I consider? So this video would answer that type of question. There are so many wonderful videos and resources available online. So again, you're going to, vet these, evaluate them using the ABCD model. There'll be some that you will eventually find are really good resources that you might turn to again and again to share with your clients. So there are literally thousands of resources available to help you and your clients gather what's out there information. Of course, you cannot know every resource that is available. You can know some good general resources and then supplement those with the specific resources that you might find that you might need in your work. I do encourage you to find and use resources that are Canadian-based and locally relevant as much as possible. You can supplement these resources when you're if you're using an American-based resource, make sure that you are balancing that with Canadian-based information. As one example, I've referred to ONET, which is the American equivalent of the NOC. And ONET has very, very good generic information describing occupations and so on. But there are limitations. For example, there may be differences in the types of education that might be needed between the US and Canada in certain fields. So you can refer clients to read some of that information up to a point, but do make sure that you are then supplementing it with valid Canadian resources, and in particular ones that will fit with the geographic region where the client is based or that they're targeting. So that's all I'm going to say for the topic of what's out there. And I just want to touch on a couple of things before we end. Just a reminder that you are doing the ABCD resource evaluation assignment, which is due at the end of this week, week 3, by midnight on Sunday. You can choose any resource at all that you want, a website, a print publication, a book, a podcast, a video, anything that interests you, but it must be one that you're familiar with, that fits with the field. So it would be, for example, a resource that you would share with clients. And this is important that it not be one that you have had exposure to previously in the program. So any of the websites that you've seen up to this point on the videos and on the PowerPoint slides in this program, in this course, and anything else in the program, that you cannot use that for this assignment. And if you have any doubts about whether the one you've picked is one that you can use, then just run it by me. Just send me a quick link and I will respond and let you know. Do ensure that you review the instruction package and the video for the assignment on Blackboard. And then I ask you to please email your assignment directly to me. Please do not submit it through Blackboard. So just send it to me at my email address, which you see there. I also encourage you to, as I've mentioned, to take some time this week to do an exploration of some of the online resources that are listed in the week 3 syllabus and that are listed in the links in this particular PowerPoint. It's very important that you do these activities as homework and that you record your results on your list of resources under the What's Out There category. Last week, I asked you to do that for the Who Am I resources that were presented, and I encourage you to go beyond those resources and explore some of your own. Then you're now going to do the same thing for What's Out There. And it really doesn't matter whether it's a digital file that you're keeping these resources organized in the 3 categories, or whether you decide to do an old-fashioned paper file or a paper list, that's fine too, as long as you have these available to you to consult when you're doing the test. It's really important that you do keep up with this so that you're not scrambling just before the test to try and pull all of this together. It's important to note that the test is time limited and you will not have time to look for resources while you're doing the test. So very important that you do take the time to compile your list and continue building on it on a week-by-week basis. So that's all for this week. Thank you for listening, and always, please do let me know if you have any questions.